Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. Virginia shares how grounding our perspectives in universal principles, coupled with curiosity, humility, and integrity, provides a powerful framework for navigating even the most challenging social and political discussions. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
As this year comes to an end, I know we're trying to rework some of the ideas and things we've introduced, but I think some of the things that I've been ruminating over about the concept of that we discussed last week, I kept ruminating over it just because perhaps the way that we talked about it could perhaps be a bit confusing. But the whole concept of my truth and your truth, I think I just want to encourage everyone to be honest about your opinions. And when you express your opinions, show up with curiosity and humility to listen to the opinions of other people. Then, that's number one. Hear with your ears, but listen with your heart. That means when somebody's speaking about something they feel passionate and they're expressing that to you, perhaps in animated, vulgar, sometimes terms, take a hard pause and say, let me see if I understood you correctly, and repeat to them what they said. Have a little bit of show up with kindness and patience to digest what another person is trying to communicate. That's imperative. To be able to identify another person's opinions, to be able to listen to another person's opinions, and to be able to discuss our mutual, perhaps difference of opinions. And I think the foundation that I would encourage you to use in disciplining yourself to do that, use this foundation. There are universal principles. They're irrefutable. They're absolute truths. And they can become very obvious very quickly and have significant impact on you and the person you're talking to if you can accept that everything isn't relative. Your opinion and their opinion can be discussed for the sake of pursuing what's true. Be curious about the information a person has access to. Become curious about the information that you have. So the concept of universal principles is there are things that are accessible to all of us because we're all a spirit. We all have a soul. We all have a body, and we're all afflicted in very similar ways by very specific things. And the first point of contact when there's an offense, it's always the heart, the mind, the will, the conscience, the feelings of a person. So this is universal to us all. And because this is universal, I think we have a point of reference, if you will. We have a base from which to start. Let's extend each other the same courtesy that we expect. Why? So that we can delve into these other information systems, like questions about the spiritual, the existential, is very real. It's a very real realm. It's an information system with a form of government. We can ask very honest and perhaps probing questions about our soul, our mind, our heart, our will, our conscience, and our feelings. Another information system, the primary sphere of government, right? That governs all of our lives. We govern our lives from there. And then we can begin to ask a lot of significant questions about how all that stuff and all those conversations show up in the third information system, which is our body. What the spirit can't access, the soul of a man will not reconcile. Guilt, conscience, shame, whatever you want to call it. The body will speak. So these are three information systems that we can access that make up an individual. So perhaps when we talk about power and authority, we can say, oh, okay, wait, every individual has power and authority to self-govern. Every individual has an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So if I'm tolerant, why am I imposing my opinions, my thoughts, my views on this person that I'm supposed to love, that I'm supposed to care about, that I want to share my opinions with? That's okay. Share your opinion, but don't shame them in the process. And if you're on the receiving end of being shamed, perhaps you can just put your hand up for a minute and say, listen, I'd like to hear what you're saying because your opinion is important to me, but I have a few questions about what you just said. You seem really angry. And I know that behind anger is a lot of hurt. So I wonder, what personal stake do you have in X, Y, and Z policy? Because I can see that this is really hurting you. And I'd like to understand how this is making you feel. Newsom sucks. Trump sucks. I don't know. I hate them both. And I have no hope. Oh, okay. So you're feeling afraid that the people that are in positions of power and authority aren't to be trusted. Yes, that's it, Virginia. Thank you. Oh, okay. Well, I see where that comes from. And I totally understand that, right? It's a very dangerous time in the world. Political systems, economic systems, social paradigm, societies, cultures, everything seems to be imploding. And for the first time in the recorded history of the world, these global economies, the Chinese, the Americans, in South America, all these global economies are all in peril. And there isn't a single global economy that is emerging to compensate for the collapse that we all clearly see is upon us. Wow, I get why you're so hateful about Trump. I get why you're so afraid and angry at Newsom, the governor of California. I see there's a lot of fear wrapped up in this, and there's a lot of insecurity. I understand that because when I left my country, for example, those things happened too. I understand fear. I just didn't understand the cussing, the insults, the assaults, and all that because you're not that kind of person. I just think if we can have a little bit of patience in engaging each other in these conversations, and hey, I'm like the next person, right? I feel deep conviction and passion about many things. So I have to train myself and exercise the discipline of listening and of wondering and of curiosity and of understanding that I may have a lot of opinions and that other person that's speaking to me has opinions, but there's one truth. And I know what the truth is because the truth will always advance life, not diminish it. In California, we have a big problem. This governor that wants to be president, there's not a single thing he's touched that hasn't been destroyed. It's obvious. Highest tax, highest home expense, highest gas, highest homelessness. There isn't one fiscal responsibility in the entire course that this governor's been in office that is not completely falling apart. Period and end of story. Can we agree that that's causing me a little bit of anxiety too? And it's causing you anxiety. And I think it's natural because we're wondering, are you kidding me? What if this guy becomes a president? How can anybody look at California? It's not even reasonable and say, we want this for the nation. Can we agree on that at least? Yeah, you're right. You can love the guy. Heck, I love him. I pray for him. But we're talking about fiscal responsibilities and we're analyzing the state like we would a company. And there's been gross negligence and mismanagement. So perhaps we can agree on that for a minute. We don't have to attack each other. The national stage, there's been a lot of confusing, chaotic things that are happening at the national stage and at the international global stage. And Donald Trump right now is our president. I notice you're offended by him on many levels. What do you find offensive about him? Maybe we can tolerate asking each other questions, right? And we can listen to each other. And I think that's the kind of exchange I want to invite people into. The vaccines. I didn't take the vaccines. I thought the whole thing, something was wrong from the very beginning with the jab, if you will, whatever they call it now. Something wasn't adding up to me. And my family stood on different sides of that equation. I work with practitioners. I'm in the medical field, and we all had a lot of questions. And we weren't seeing a lot of the things we were hearing play out with the ventilators and all that. So what happened? There was a lot of confusion, chaos, and dis-ease in my own family, and we all had a different opinion of it. But here we are many years behind it, and we're seeing that a significant part of the world's population has been eliminated, and incredible lawsuits, litigations, doctors' practices, careers are ending, political careers are ending, billions, trillions of dollars are being lost, and the conversation continues. So perhaps our opinion was wrong about COVID, about the vaccine. Dr. McCullough saved my life. Dr. Cowden saved my life. Heidi Ahrens saved my life when my lungs were collapsing. I did the ivermectin, the hydrochloroquine. I did the IV therapy. I did everything. I gave myself a shot so my lungs could drain the water that was retaining, so I didn't asphyxiate. If they would have put me in a ventilator, I would have died. That's a very real thing. That's my personal testimony. Am I the end-all authority on everything? No. But I have seen hundreds of people, and I know literally between everybody that we've dealt with and everything, thousands that have died just in our sphere. And it's tragic. But what I find interesting is how many people are willing to show up to the conversation that now has shifted right from the vaccine to the borders, to the economies, to the candidates, all this nonsense. The topics aren't nonsensical. The way they're being discussed are nonsensical. And I'm surprised by how many people have not said, hey, remember the whole COVID thing that caused so much tension? I was wrong about that. If you're listening to this podcast and you're one of the people that was in a stupor, was dumbfounded by all the information coming at us really fast, and you chose to be vaccinated, and you've had to bear or live with the consequence of that, hey, this is a beautiful opportunity to say, shoot, you know what? I want to show up to conversations with more curiosity instead with so much dogmatism. Because maybe, I don't know, maybe there was more to all that than I was willing to listen to. All the vaccine injuries now that we're aware of with children. How many of us that were wrong are showing up with curiosity? What in me wouldn't tolerate the opinion of another person with curiosity? And I guess I'm just inviting people to exercise their full power, their full authority, and to do that, to self-govern, right? And make decisions of conscience. But to do that, you're going to have a measure of grace for the opinions of others. And you're going to have to learn the discipline of patience in communicating your own ideas. And whatever you do in the process of learning this new thing, tragic that it has to be new, because I think we should have always been able to engage each other with dignity. And I think in all of our passion and our conviction and in all our fear, that's not always an easy thing to do. But now look how beautiful what we can learn from. Look at all the loss. Let's take the beauty from those ashes and learn how to show up with curiosity, respecting the dignity of each other's opinions, and seek truth together. And I think that's real power. That is real authority. And that's where we begin to experience freedom, not because we agree always, but because we can respect the frailty of the human condition and all the limitations that come in our common humanity, with our common humanity. And I think that's how we can turn around the path of destruction we're on in one generation. I'll take the gender thing. It's very controversial. I think it's not as controversial as they make it. Okay? The trans issue, the gender issue. A man has a set of chromosomes that identify him as a man. His anatomy bears witness. A woman has a set of, her constitution bears witness of the same thing. She's got chromosomes. She's got a constitution that bears witness of the fact, and anatomy, by the way, of her sex. She's a female. The male is a male. This is a law of nature. Now, somebody might say, yes, but I never felt right in my body. Okay. Wow, tell me about that. I wonder what that would feel like. Describe that to me. Can you sit for a second and ask the person who wants to have a sex change or doesn't feel like they're in the right body? Do you think you could love the spirit, the soul, and the body of that person enough for a nanosecond to become curious and ask them a question about that? It doesn't mean you're agreeing. It doesn't mean you're compliance. It means you're giving them the dignity of what it is to be a human being. And maybe if you can shut up and listen with your heart, what you're hearing with your ears, maybe when you pause and say, wow, I never looked at it that way. Maybe that other person that's struggling and is in a state of confusion and chaos and dis-ease like you are about other things, maybe they'll say, what are your thoughts about what I told you? Maybe by your curiosity and your respect, you'll get back what you dished out. And maybe we can all learn something together. The man that wants to become a woman can do whatever he wants, of course, but that's not a lawful thing to impose on a general population that's not confused about the science of this. Because after he goes through his whole sex change, the innermost parts of his being are still that of a male. The same for the woman. You can do anything you want to your body, to your anatomy, but don't expect everybody else to pay for it. But of course, you live in a country where you have the liberty to do that. But it's not just, it's an injustice actually to expect everybody else to pay for your desire to live consistent with what you feel. Why? Because it's not going to change the fact that you're still a woman after you remove your breasts and go through all of the process of a sex change. It still doesn't change the fact that you're a woman. And there are so many courageous, beautiful people that have been they're on the other side of this, who really have lost an identity, have lost everything, and are so angry and frustrated because they were manipulated, they were deceived at worst, and at best, nobody showed up with more curiosity about the bizarre things they were feeling. And instead, they sold them a bill of goods. And I want our listening audience to think about one thing, to ask yourself one thing. Who financially benefits from the confusion, chaos, and dis-ease that propaganda is selling us? Who benefits? Trace the money. I just find it very peculiar that as the abortion debate was put to rest by the Supreme Court of these United States, that didn't deprive anybody of having an abortion. They just said that it's the individual choice and decision of the mother of the person, and that morality would not be legislated in that way by Congress, right? That it was a decision of the individual person, and it was up to the individual states to decide ultimately the disposition. But Roe versus Wade was over, that the Supreme Court had no right to impose sanctions, right? And with the life of that unborn, the destiny of that unborn child, right? I just find it very interesting that when that came down, immediately the transgender and the sex change and the homosexuality, if you will, debate really escalated. And then it occurred to me, wow, all the money that was lost from abortion clinics, they shifted that, still went after our kids, and they're trying to shove this other agenda down our throats. Follow the money. But that's the power and authority that we have to show up to these difficult conversations that are highly controversial and show up with curiosity and engage each other in conversations about the root cause of these things we're discussing, knowing with the transgender thing, that's pretty straightforward. Shoot, you can go through $500,000, $250,000. Insurance companies are really stumbling all over each other to cover the costs of those things, right? But at the end of the day, that boy that became a girl is still a boy. And the girl that wanted to be a man and she became a man, she still has the innermost constitutions of a woman. So where does that leave us? I think the invitation is to displace confusion, chaos, and dis-ease, to show up with humility and integrity in conversations so we can preserve relationships. And as we show up with curiosity, extend each other the courtesy of asking hard questions for the sake of what? Love, integrity, and not forgetting what is sacred about us as individuals. I think that's the invitation. There's laws that govern the universe. They're irrefutable. The universe is fine-tuned to sustain all of our lives. There's laws. There's laws that govern the spiritual realm. There's laws that govern the soul. There's laws that govern the body. And just because we want to change this or that about ourselves, we can do whatever we want. Of course, we have liberty. But that doesn't change the consequence of the decisions we make if we oppose what's lawful and what's not. I can't be black, no matter how much I love black skin. And the fact they have a constant tan. I mean, they just, their skin's so good. They look so nice. I like the hair. I like the skin. I love all that. I can't change my very constitution to become black. A black person might say, how funny, Virginia. I always wanted to be white. And I thought, really? Why is that? I don't know. There's so much stigma with racism. And I don't know. I feel really unworthy. I think if we can show up with curiosity to these conversations, we'll understand that there is a creative force that made humanity, and he made us very different. And that creative force and the balance, harmony, and coherence from that force is what sustains our very life. And those laws aren't manifested just outside of us that again, fine-tune the universe to sustain our very life. But there are laws, our conscience bears witness in our very soul, in our very psychology, in our mind, our heart, our will, our conscience, and our feelings. There's laws in there that when we give life, just because we can create life doesn't give us the right to take it. And if we neglect these laws that govern our soul, we're going to die prematurely, because the body's role is to contain the spirit and the soul of a man so that they can live free. And when there's a violation of these things, things aren't going to go well for us. So I guess the invitation again is, wow, show up with curiosity, show up with love. Know that, yes, you have strong opinions. They may be valid. So does another person. They may be valid or not. Who cares? Can you extend them the courtesy of listening and of agreeing perhaps to disagree? How about if we developed the discipline to agree to disagree, but to no matter what, show up with love and respect? I think it would turn this whole thing around. And I'll introduce this final thing that's caused a lot of confusion in our midst. Charlie Kirk and Candace Owen were very, very good friends. They had their early beginnings, or they met during their early beginnings together. And they had a fantastic relationship. She's wounded and hurt by the tragic loss, as are all of us. We witnessed a person who was an adamant believer in discourse. Because when people stop talking, they start killing each other. And he just wanted to invite honest discourse in colleges and universities. And obviously he was taken from us prematurely. Whether you liked him or not, it's inconsequential. The fact is, an innocent life was taken right in front of all of us. And all of us felt the loss and the shock and awe of it. But the way Candace is showing up with questions and the way she's addressing the situation, it feels more destructive than constructive. And I just think this is where we have to take a hard pause. Sometimes maybe we show up in the same way. Answer this for me. Answer this one. Well, I just have this question. I just want to know where this came from. And nobody's telling me this. Nobody's telling me that. Well, you're not asking in such a way that you're desiring honest discourse and answers. You're asking prosecutorial questions. Do you show up to conversations in the name of honesty and integrity and in the spirit, in the name of setting boundaries? Are you showing up with conversations wanting to make a statement, wanting to be heard, wanting to make a point, wanting to control? Or are you showing up with curiosity? And I don't know. I think when we're able to reject manipulative discourse, and by the way, you guys, sometimes manipulative discourse isn't always intentional. It comes usually out of stupidity and ignorance and being dumbfounded by something. But you're so scared, you show up and you're really combative. Be honest with yourself. And the reason this is important is because if you do not think deeply about the things that I'm trying my best to communicate, you're going to be an angry, combative, lonely person, and you will not live with power or authority. And as pious as your convictions and your opinions and your way of thinking may be, or as sure and confident as you think you are, you will not be respected. You will not be heard. You'll only cause destruction to others and worse to yourself. And I think that's a practical application of power and authority. I want you to understand what it is to live with power and authority, protecting everything that's sacred about you and another person, simply by showing up to discourse with humility, curiosity, and questions. And when the argument becomes more important than the person you're engaged with and the person you're trying to make the point, the argument to, stop talking because everything's already been lost.
We hope listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to Rest with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.